Welcome along to another bonus episode of the Perfect Press Release podcast with me, Tom Clarke. Today we're chatting to someone who knows more about press releases than most. Emma Padden's career has seen her ascend to the very top of the PR industry, working as a senior director at several of the biggest agencies in the UK. But recently Emma, along with 7 other equally illustrious colleagues, made a leap into the unknown and set up their own organisation. PR Mums is a unique community that offers support for women looking to return to the industry after taking time out to start a family. So I thought, who better to come on this podcast and talk about how press releases can help organisations of any size, from massive corporations who have the budgets to engage PR agencies, right down to brand new startups with an important story to tell. Here's Emma. Hope you enjoy.
PR Mums is a business set up to champion women in the workplace and help women reach senior and leadership roles and address challenges that come with that, such as childcare, which is a big thing, but it could be anything from the fertility journey all the way through to retirement.
I think that's such an important part of modern work, isn't it? My wife actually works as a coach. And she started out doing a similar thing, which was trying to get women who'd been on maternity leave and had been in, working for companies out of that and starting a kind of new chapter in their careers by setting up their own businesses or going into something completely new, or actually going back into the workplace as somebody who's had a kid and kind of, their lives have changed in loads of different ways. How have you found the response has been to PR Mums? Has it sort of taken off because of this kind of ubiquity of women trying to look for, new opportunities?
I think we were exceptionally lucky when we launched. I think probably the timing was just right. But we went from obviously no one knowing who we were launching, and it just exploded. On the day that we launched, I don't think I got out of bed in my pajamas, like typing away, sending out releases, LinkedIn, all those different things all activated. There was a team of us as well. It wasn't just me. At the time, it was, myself, PR Mums, but we had a board of 7 women as well. So collectively, and 2 guys as well, Hector and Rory. So together we were just all on it at launch. And I think that kind of holistic approach really helped us just explode. But there was just this wall of communication coming towards me on that day. And I didn't change out of my pajamas for about 48 hours because I was just like, oh, and it was phenomenal. It was scary, but it was absolutely phenomenal. And it's very, very much needed. I think that was very, very clear. We had a huge volume of people from the industry supporting us, and all these women who approached us as well, just to share their stories, and they continue to do so as well, is incredible. And to hear how women have wanted to reach a certain level in their career and they haven't because of childcare is the fundamental and prolific reason why some of these challenges occur. There are others that exist as well, and hence why we called it PR Mums as well, because we knew that was the kind of the reason. It was a bit of a Ron Seal name. But it's been phenomenal. I think for the first 3+ months, I was probably on about 12 calls a day, back to back, with different agencies or businesses looking to think about how they could work with us, sure. But primarily it was women talking about their experiences, and most of them would probably end up crying, and it just got very emotional. So very much needed.
And what is it then that PR Mums does to help women back into the workforce? There's a recruitment part of it. It's a connection network.
We
trying
have
to help.
four pillars to the business. Fundamentally, we are set up to make change. So campaigning and advocacy is hugely important to us. And if we exist, then we exist to help other women. That's our sole purpose. But to do that, we need to do 3 other things. We need a community of women. So we have that, and that grows on a daily basis. And those women are looking to either speak to other women like-minded. They are looking for ways to approach their career or get back into the workforce. Not everyone wants a 9 to 5. And I think post-pandemic as well, there's lots of conversations around the workplace and what that looks like. Some of them are slipping back to old habits, which, isn't really great for families, especially women. So community is a huge one. As part of that, we have a content platform and events. We have events that we personally kind of deliver, the PR Mum salons. They will always be in the morning, so people can go on their way to work and not at lunchtime or an evening. They will be about not necessarily about the PR industry, but they will be about, well, there'll be a woman predominantly, but something that's just generally quite interesting, or someone who women would find inspiring. We also have a partnership with the CIPR called the Agency Debates, and that very much is about the industry and how what the role of women within those conversations. So it could be, we had one recently which was about generational differences and approach to work, and how Gen Z is very different from a late millennial to Gen X or boomer, and what we can learn from that process to make everyone's lives better. And I think ultimately part of that was also, from our experience, what can we do to pass down to the kind of future generations to make sure that they have a better work-life balance or workplace experience. And so we have another one recently, which is about leadership and women in the workplace, and a variety of different things. We also have training and consultancy as well. So we look at things like policy in the workplace. We go in and we can consult and look at that. We can also do training programs as well to ensure everyone is kind of up to speed on kind of the language and habits that they need to kind of adopt in a workplace to make this better. And just progressive and move forward. And then also recruitment as well, as you mentioned previously. And that again is looking at, sure, there are people that might want to be, I want to be an MD, I want to be a CEO, but by and large, it's mostly women who want to go back into the workplace and have a role that is suitable to their lifestyle and doesn't inhibit their chances of reaching a senior leadership position. And that has also been challenging as well, like having those conversations with businesses and, for them to kind of open up and see the benefits of that. Otherwise, we're just ultimately losing incredible talent because they're tapping out of their roles.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the opportunities available to them.
And what's been the response of the industry? Is the industry improving, do you think, in terms of reintegrating mums back into the workforce? Is that something that there's a positive trend there, or has it always been an issue?
Yeah, I think it's a conversation people are having. Well, I think people are having conversations, but actions aren't probably happening as quickly as the conversation is happening. But those things take time, right? At least conversations are happening, and it's becoming something that is bubbling on the surface. And hopefully those things are ripe for change. We are seeing more and more people coming forward and actively wanting to make change. It's not just tokenistic. And you don't want to be kind of like mum washing in any way. So yes, people are making change. It's not going to be immediate. Some people are already doing those things and it's been baked into their businesses from day one, and that is incredible. I think the bigger businesses, what they want to make change and make an active solution to some of the challenges that they're having, it's clunky. There's like so many there's policies to unpick and put back in place, and just changing mindsets and habits that have just been ingrained in something, and that takes a long time to change. But everyone seems to be open to it. It just takes time.
And your organization, I suppose, sits neatly in the middle of these two groups. You've got the workforce themselves that need these opportunities and this support network, if you like, and then you've got the industry on the other side, presumably willing to engage and working with you to kind of make that happen. So it's a kind of feels like a nice kind of synergy between the two. You want to call them two warring sides, but the two sides of the situation, I suppose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why it's really important we have people like the PRCA and CRPR working with us, because, they are also agents of change and can facilitate those things from an industry level. But yeah, you hear it from both sides. And we had, I think it was in our first week, we had a woman who was currently a director in her business. She had just returned from mat leave. She was like bawling her eyes out she was just exhausted by her life, but exhausted by the kind of tireless conversations with her business around like, being a flexible working so she can pick up her child from nursery, or just even like the cadence of coming back into the workplace after you've been on mat leave. You're fundamentally changed as a human being. And, it's not just a case of you worked here previously, so you can come back a year later and everything's the same. It hasn't. Everything's changed with them as an individual, but with you as a business as well, and making that process better. And she was just like, I can't. At the same time, we had the business asking for a meeting because they wanted to address the fact they recognised they'd screwed up, but they'd never really had this experience before, and they wanted to know what they could do to improve it. But actually what they did was they tasked the individual to sort the problem out rather than take it on as a business. Think, no, it's just kind of like pushing away the problem. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work to do still, and we do get it from both sides, but that's what we're here to try and help move forward.
Absolutely. And well, let's move it neatly, segue it into press releases and talk about, I mean, I was interested in your experiences there when, the business was first sort of starting out, that it was really busy, but sort of good busy, because you had a lot of interest and a lot of people, wanting to talk to you about it, which I feel is probably quite unusual for a lot of people out there that are starting something new, and all they're hearing is a kind of yawning silence. And so walk me through how you did your kind of initial PR, if you like, on this new organization. Did press releases play a part in it? Presumably all of you have PR experience, so you're well versed in how to sort of do this, which may have been one of the reasons you were successful. I don't know.
I think that the initial press release helped solidify actually who we were, because I think we'd had lots of conversations, and we just, every day things were changing. We started off just being something to do with recruitment, and actually it evolved into so much more, and became much more meaty. So it's getting those things on paper. And I think also having a team of people with such experience in the comms industry, like that press release, the first one, took so long to write because everyone was quibbling over every single word. Every word mattered in where it meant. If you put that there, not there, actually does it? I mean, the score. Like it took ages and a few bottles of wine. We got there, and it's still, actually, I read it back again, and it's like, it's a really good piece of work there, and you can tell that there's kind of like a real craft to what we did.
Yeah.
Anyway, the press release aside, the whole process to getting to where we got to, we didn't actually have much of a strategy in place, if I'm completely frank. Because I think we were just like still scrabbling around, making sure that the website worked and all these different things up until the last moment. But we knew we knew who our audience were, that the release was going to go to. Like, no, it's an industry piece of work, business. So we got a very, very small audience of where we need to send that press release. So in advance, we kind of teed up the key people. We got interviews booked in with them, and we knew when they were going to be launching that story on the day that we were launching. And then on the very day, we all, 7 of us, pushed out on social media, like, this is who we are and what we're doing. And then once the news kind of went live, then we could start pushing that out as well. So we had industry news. We then got picked up by The Independent. They did a piece on us as well. Times Radio, sorry, picked up to do a piece as well. We've actually been pushed that back. And there's a few other little bits from podcasts and so forth. So on the back of the industry news and through social media, primarily LinkedIn, nothing else, because we didn't have the groundswell on any other channel. We got picked up in other places, and it went further. We actually ended up in Variety in Los Angeles as well. Amazing. I mean, it was extraordinary. But yeah, we were very clear on, we had a small audience. We were tailoring that release specifically for those audiences.
And did you, with the press release and with the launch, was it a strategy, a conscious strategy, if you like, to withhold information until that launch and then blast it, or to, whether there was nobody knew anything about this until they saw on LinkedIn that you?
Yeah, well, that's I say yes. It's actually not entirely true. So ahead of launch, we'd already seeded it with lots of different businesses because we needed their buy-in. If it wasn't going to work, and they weren't going to buy it. It's pointless doing what we were doing. So we spoke to numerous people across the industry. So at launch, we had a lot of industry or businesses within the industry who were actively supporting us, and they were all up on the website, and they were mentioned within the release as well. So we had that on side. But other than that, I mean, they were kind of the businesses that we were closely linked to, and we all had connections with or knew people. So it was a big enough group, but it wasn't a huge group. And then when we launched, more came. So it was probably a bit more of a surprise for most people that didn't see it coming, because I hadn't even told my friends I was doing it. They didn't know until it launched.
But it sounds like that press release did exactly the job it was supposed to do, which is why we do them, I suppose. It's this vehicle, it's this opportunity to make an announcement that people haven't heard before, and do it in such a way that's structured, that allows your work to continue and to drip feed through to the people that matter. So I mean, I think that's a fantastic example of that. I want you to go back a little bit now and put your sort of PR director hat on and talk about maybe that collaborative process that you had with the PR mums, and you're sitting and drinking a nice bottle of wine and kind of putting together the press release. I presume that when you're sitting in an agency and working with a big customer, putting together a press release is equally collaborative, but maybe a little bit more difficult to get sign off and to get kind of agreement on. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think there's different factors here. Sometimes it's an absolute breeze. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth. And it really depends on what the story is and who the team are. So where they work well is where there is just genuine news, whether that is connected to the news and the news agenda, or whether it's the news that you have got about your business or brand or whatever. Where they don't work so well, it's where it's focused on a brand agenda, and that can happen a lot when you've got a kind of a cast of thousands who've got to be approval from a client side who are not comms experts. Not to say that they aren't aware of it, absolutely, from within the marketing mix, but they are not a comms expert. It's very easy for above the line messaging to kind of slip in, brand messaging to slip in, and it really dilutes the story. And then you'll have to go through legal, and then you'll have to go through compliance, whatever else, kind of, the different departments you have to go through, and you're left with something. You're like, we know this is going to just go nowhere, but this is the approved piece of work. And whilst you can push back to a point, I mean, there's so many people through the line, especially when you're dealing with big companies, to kind of like, you're just not going to get that pushback is only going to go so far. But I think most of that then comes down to education about the value of PR, what it does, and what the purpose of a press release and what it's there to do and the job it's there to do. There's also a real, I mean, God, numerous calls about, we need to send a press release out of XYZ, and you're like, but that's why. It's not a story. You don't need a press release for everything. I think like fewer quality news items like would serve you well. I used to work, one of my clients was a big supermarket, and it was like pushing something out every 2 or 3 times a day, and it's like literally it's pointless. There's only so many things that are going to stick. It's just a ridiculous amount of work for little return. So I think where they work well is where there's genuine news. Where they don't work so well is where you have too many cooks. There's a lack of education about what communication is, and probably as well, I mean, I'm from going up through the ranks, it's going to a senior level. When you're writing press releases and going through that craft, it's usually kind of like an account manager level that's writing that and managing that process. And it'll go back up for approvals internally to someone like me, absolutely. But the experts in that room are the account managers, account directors, absolutely. And it's kind of like being on board with them when they want to push back as well. And like, this isn't going to work. It's not going to cut through. Because also as well, your audience, the media, what they're going to like, and you're going to cut that release. So that you can go to a variety of different journalists at the end of the day who you hold relationships with, or are you going to blast it out on a wire and it goes to multiple people. But you tailor those things, and the message within that and the story within it is specific for those audiences.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely crucial point about sort of quality over quantity, or sort of news over just sort of noise, I suppose. And I think that's the mistake that lots of businesses make, whether they work with an agency or not, is just this idea of feeling like if they're not talking, then they're sort of, people aren't listening, people don't know who they are. And this idea of less really is more is something that's it feels quite counterintuitive for a lot of these organizations, particularly larger organizations. So I think that's a really fantastic point. Um, we were talking earlier, or before we started, about this idea of the press release generally, and this idea of, is the press release dead in today's world of social media and all sorts of different channels, and the ability to put videos out there and sort of, talk about a story before, having to sort of sit down and write a dry old press release about it. What's been your take on that over your experience of working with agencies, working with big customers, but also starting your own business? How do you see the sort of future of the press release?
I I asked quite a lot of people about this before I spoke to you, and I think that because I actually thought there'd be a lot of people saying, actually, do you know what? Nah, we don't really need them anymore. But they do. They absolutely have a role. And starting PR mums, and as I've said, we went through that process of crafting that press release, and it took a lot of time, a lot of wine, everyone kind of like going through each word, because it's important and it tells your story and it tells who you are, and it really solidifies, your why and what you're doing. So I think that it is a really important exercise when you have news to kind of be able to craft that, and it is a skill in a kind of nuanced way that tells that specific story at that specific time. But how that information is then used can be very different. I think they are great for brands and businesses. They can put them up on their website. They're great for SEO. It's great for content for a website. But also from a PR point of view, yes, you can push that out as is, but I think it kind of, when it's done well, it becomes a backing singer to an actual kind of communication with a journalist. You'll know when you're speaking to whichever journalist at whichever desk that these are 3 bullets that they really want to take from this story. So that will be my kind of like structure up front, and the rest of the release will be below, so they can go back and read through it if those kind of key bullets really kind of like whet their appetite for the story. And then when you're doing that, I think what's really important is then the subject title, if you're sending it via email, what that is to kind of really capture them, because the header of the press release might not be it. So you've got the capacity to tweak and change. And I think that's it. It's like how getting it right and getting the structure right and having a press release is brilliant. The traditional format, I think, works fantastically. It's there kind of like for a legacy point of view, you can kind of keep going back to it and reviewing and from time, but also you've got something then you can play with for the media and kind of tweak it to whatever would appeal to them.
Yeah.
So it's a really important document.
I mean, I'm interested in this relationship, I suppose, between the PR person and the journalist. And I suppose what I'm asking you, who's gone through a career of, I presume, starting out in an agency as a junior, who was probably responsible for writing a lot of press releases, and then going through the process as being an account director, right up to the sort of top of the agencies where you've been. I suppose that relationship with the journalist, what have you sort of seen evolve over that time? And secondly, is there the appetite within the media for kind of unsolicited press releases, or is it that relationship that you have with the journalist that sort of cements the deal, and the press releases are sort of just part of that? How do you see that kind of relationship between the PR industry and the media?
I think it's a really important relationship. I think lots, and going back way back when I first started out in my career, I mean, lots of the journalists I spoke to then have either left journalism, moved on to do something else, or have gone on to do something quite incredible. I mean, I can remember, God, what level I was, but going to see Sophie Ridge. And I think it was to talk about beauty products, if I'm completely honest. I mean, we were both very young, and we went for a lovely lunch in Wapping, had a great laugh. Now she is got her political program on Sky. And so, your career is going to be, so, that relationship wouldn't still work. But I think holding relationships with journalists is really good, and especially with kind of key topic areas. But they're also exceptionally stretched as in their careers. They're wearing multiple different hats, and they are asked to do kind of a variety of different things. It's supposed to, I mean, back in the day as well, when I went to, let's say, a health journalist or a beauty journalist or whatever it may be, you knew that those journalists were experts in that particular field. A beauty journalist would know every single ingredient in your product and what they did and the science behind it. A health journalist would, want to know where the peer-reviewed data was and where the research was, and they could call that out. I mean, some people still do those things, absolutely, and now you'll probably find someone who's writing about health, but equally writing about consumer affairs and something else. So some of the expertise on their side is also lacking. The industry has changed, journalism has changed, PR has changed, and what we want to get out of it has fundamentally changed because of social media as well. And I think now you probably add AI into that conversation. But it's like if we had one of my clients was a care provider. They had, and especially around like the pandemic, they had kind of very salient messages that they wanted to communicate. And it's like, we've got very specific people that we want this message to go to. It's not going to be an en masse press release or news that goes out. It just isn't. But we would not be able to do that unless we had the relationships with key people.
Thanks so much to Emma for coming on the show. PR Mums is a truly fantastic organisation that can help women who are planning to return to work, start on a new challenge, or meet other people in a similar situation. Find out more about the work they do at their website, which is www.pr-mums.com. That's www.pr-mums.com. That's it for now. Stand by for some more interviews coming soon. Thanks for listening. The Perfect Press Release is a Clement Stories podcast, written and produced by me, Tom Clarke. If you need help writing your press releases, you can contact me on LinkedIn or via my website. The links are in the show notes.